All right. Thank you, Brett. I was thinking the other day that you came here like 30 years ago. Isn't that right? I mean, I came here 30 years ago, and we had hardly any staff. He was one of the first hires, and if there's been anybody who's glued the place together over the last 30 years more than Brett Hurst, I don't know who that person would be. He's an amazing gift, and all right, so you've had me thinking about curiosity. I don't do this all that much anymore. In fact, Alf invited me to preach here last summer, and I declined. I said, I think I'm done doing that. But then Brett called, and well, now here I am working on this for 4 months. I've been working on this. I used to have to do a sermon a week, and 4 months working on this. I'm not sure that the end result will necessarily indicate that I put that much time in on it. But I have enjoyed exploring this whole question of curiosity. For me, at least, questions, and get this thing going right. You start out in life, you can't do much. You can't say anything. You can't even lift your head. You can't even roll over. All you can do is wave your arms and legs until somebody figures out what you need and gives it to you. But, okay, next slide. Somehow we get from that point to that point. I'm not sure how. Or, next slide. MJ, is he really that far off the ground? I look at that picture, I think, I don't know if that's possible. How does a human being do that? Or the next slide, on the other hand, we've got Mother Teresa. The thing that unlocks all of this for human beings is the ability to ask questions, the ability to be curious about things. Einstein said, I have no special talent. I am just passionately curious. At one time, he said, imagination is more important than knowledge, more important than intellect. I take some hope in that. The growth plan that God has for us is curiosity, and I'd like to think about what I would describe, I guess, as holy curiosity. Okay, next slide. Thanks. All right, so I think we honor God by being curious in whatever area. I'm not just talking about religion. Whatever it is that's important to you to do in your life, in fact, the variety of things, be curious about things. On the other hand, the strange thing that happens to us as we get older is that we become less and less curious. I was reading something the other day that said a young child will ask as many as 300 or 400 questions a day. A question every 2.5 minutes, according to one study. But our curiosity peaks at the age of 10 and then goes downhill after that. So that by the time you get to be my age, it's just a half a dozen questions or so every day. What is it that kills curiosity? Next slide. All right. One thing I think is complacency. We figure we got enough. Who needs more? We've all heard this thing how many times? 1,000,000 times. What's this? Smartphone. There's more computing power in this smartphone than they needed to get to the moon. Technically speaking, I'm thinking, okay, so I could probably get to the moon just with this, but really all I want is a pizza. We just get complacent after a while. Another thing is impatience. We get sick and tired of asking questions. Stop with the questions. Let's just go. Or anxiety. Don't bother me with the facts. I've already made up my mind. Or anxiety. We don't know what the question will produce. Apathy. I think tucked in the back of all of our closets is that jacket that Melania wore, remember, in the first presidency of Trump. She went down to the border with that jacket that said on the back, I just don't care. I don't know how many times you find yourself saying that. I'm surprised how many times I say that. So apathy, and then, of course, finally, fear of being stupid. My number one vow is don't look stupid. That's why doing this sort of thing, I'm just have to stare into my greatest fear every time I do something like this. But the good news, if there are any of you in this room who are also as afraid as I am of being afraid, there is a day on the calendar, I've learned, that is just for you, and it's September 28th. It is National Ask Stupid Questions Day. Came across this on the calendar, it's really there. All right, so in the great tradition of asking questions, next slide, I've got a few questions. I thought I'd run through with you for a few minutes now. First of all, what's up with truth? You know, Jesus said, if you continue in my word, you are truly my disciples, you will know the truth, and the truth will set you free. But then a little later on, Pilate asked, what is truth? This is the great dividing line in America these days. We are on one side or another on just about every kind of topic, from politics to religion to science to you pick it. We're either here or we're there. What's up with truth? What's up with human suffering? I'll probably take this one to the grave with me. You probably will too. I know I can't remember the number of times I've quoted Viktor Frankl. Remember, Viktor was in one of the Nazi death camps for 2.5 years, and he studied people and how they did in suffering. And when he got out, he wrote this great phrase, there must be meaning in suffering, because if there's no meaning in suffering, there's no meaning in life, because life is suffering. But why? I mean, I think Richard Rohr says there are two great teachers in life. One is love, the other is suffering. I'd be fine with just one teacher. I don't need that other teacher. What's up with suffering? Okay. Then I wonder what's up with human sexuality. Terry and I met each other 62 years ago in a dream, literally. She was new in our school. I don't remember that I'd ever met her or spoken with her, but I dreamed about her one night. And after that dream, I got to ask that girl out. And so here we are today. But you know, what is it? Yeah. Einstein, you know, he was 8 years old. He was given a directional compass, north, south, east, west. And he said as an 8-year-old, he was fascinated by what is the mysterious force out there that always directs that needle in one particular way. He said, decades later, after unlocking the secrets of the cosmos, he said he still was that little boy wondering about the power that attracts the needle. So I wonder, what is it about Terry that attracted me? What is it about me that attracted her? But then I wonder this other question. What is it then that attracts this man, not necessarily to this woman, but to this other man, or this woman to this other woman? Who can explain that? I have no explanation for that. Pope Francis was being questioned on that whole subject of our changing landscape of human sexuality, and he said, but who am I to judge? So I've got questions. I got questions about world religions. You know, there are 8 billion people living on planet Earth these days. About 90% of them claim some sort of religious association. We are, as human beings, inherently spiritual in nature. But why am I a Christian? I mean, if I'd been born in Tokyo or Tibet or Timbuktu, what religion would I be? Why is it that I'm a Christian? When I had been a Christian, if my father hadn't been a pastor, and if my wife hadn't been passionately committed to following Jesus, I don't know. I've got these questions. And I wonder what's up with evil. If this is a loving God, we're told, who created everything, how can a good and loving God allow evil to come? I mean, where did the evil even come from? I've got these questions. Maybe you can help me with them. What's up with heaven and hell? You know, nearly 700 times I've stood in places or sat in living rooms, counseled people about heaven and hell. What's up with all these? So I've got lots of questions, and really at one time, this was 4 months ago when I first started getting ready for this thing, I thought, well, maybe I'll just run through these questions. We'll spend 30 or 40 minutes working on, heaven and hell and suffering and truth and all the rest of that stuff. Then I thought, who cares? I mean, who cares what I think about? What I really wonder is, what do you think about these things? And how is it that you decide what you believe about these things? What is it that trains your mind to go in certain directions? So, I think it was Paul said, cast down imagination and every vain thing that exalts itself above the knowledge of Christ. Bring into captivity every thought to the obedience of Christ. How is that we can bring our thoughts into obedience in Christ? We have thoughts that take us all over the place. But what does holy curiosity look like? So I decided I would look at this through the lens of one of Jesus' experiences. I don't know what the other speakers are speaking on. Maybe somebody's already chosen this one, so I'll just give you my take on it. But it concerns the woman who was caught in the act of committing adultery. So, John chapter 8, if you want to follow along with that. In the preceding verses, Jesus has been under intense questioning by the religious officials. They wanted to know what he was saying and why he was saying it. And this went on day after day after day. And so it says at the end of chapter 7, we end one day. And the passage, that chapter ends with these words, after this, they went to their homes, but Jesus went to the Mount of Olives. This little glimpse into Jesus, to my knowledge, there was no Holiday Inn on the Mount of Olives in Jesus' day. There's no Holiday Inn on the Mount of Olives today. It's just a hill covered with olive trees and pine trees and cedar trees and grass. Maybe you've been there. It's a beautiful place. But I'm thinking about the religious leaders going to their comfortable homes, staying on their comfortable beds with their comfortable mattresses and their comfortable pillows, and Jesus leaning up against a tree, pulling up his robe. Yeah, people are talking a lot about Jesus these days, And it's like I was saying about truth. We're on one side or the other side about Jesus. So one of the things that helps me think, I hope, correctly about Jesus is this picture of him with his robe pulled up around him, sleeping on the Mount of Olives. Such incredible humility. Well, all right, so in the morning, he came to the temple and all the people were teaching him. The people came and he sat down and he began to teach them, and then these words, the scribes and the Pharisees. I'm going to pause on those two words just for a moment. The scribes and the Pharisees. Who were these people? Sometimes it's a little difficult for us to translate what they were doing 2,000 years ago into a word that would make sense to us today. So I like what my friend Dale Bruner, a great biblical theologian, what he says. He describes the scribes and Pharisees with these two words, the very serious. They were the people who were what were they serious about? My youngest sister, 8 years younger than me, she's kind of going through her stuff and they're downsizing, and she said, hey, I came across our mother's Bible. Would you like it? So she sent it to me. I mean, it's one of my treasures now. And it is falling apart. So a while back I decided, I want to read 2 chapters a day from my mother's Bible. It's the old English language. It's tough to get through. And every time I close it up, another piece falls off of the cover. I'm not sure that the Bible will still be there when I get to the last chapter in Revelation. That's something like 592 days it'll take me at 2 chapters a day to get there. But last week I finished up with Numbers. So I've been going through Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers. If you want to know what the very serious were very serious about, read Leviticus, Exodus, Numbers. Not for the faint of heart. And oh, by the way, in 1,000 years after all those words were written the first time. They'd been applied and applied and applied in ways that the very serious would then apply to life in Jesus' day. So these were the very serious. Now, I don't know about you. I was thinking about these two words. Would you say that you're very serious about following Jesus? I mean, I know some of you guys. You're very serious. I think of myself as very serious. So anyway, when I read these verses, I'm thinking, does this have something to do with me? Am I one of these very serious people that needs to be sort of careful? All right, so the very serious, the scribes and Pharisees, brought a woman who had been caught in adultery, and making her stand before all of them, they said to him, "Teacher, this woman was caught in the very act of committing adultery." So it was these very serious religious leaders who brought this woman. But where was the man? I mean, it was caught in the very act. That would suggest a man. But they only brought the woman. You know, it was tough being a woman in Jesus' day. I'm not sure that it's, well, no, I am sure. I don't think it's as difficult today as it was 2,000 years ago. But if you want to check to see how you're behaving in your very serious following of Jesus, just pay attention to the women who are around you. What do you think they would say? Anyway, so they said, "Now in the law, Moses commanded us to stone such a woman. What do you say?" They said this to test him so that they might have some charge to bring against him. So the very serious were very obviously serious about adultery, so much so that they said the penalty was being stoned to death. Now, this is a gruesome form. I've been back and forth on capital punishment. Right now, I'm on I just don't think it's a good idea. But be that as it may, this was a form of capital punishment, maybe one of the most severe forms that they had in Jesus' day. And it worked like this. You would measure a person, find out how tall they were, and then double that, find a ledge that is that far above the ground, push them over so that their head would fall and land first, and then the people would start throwing rocks from above until the person was dead. This is gruesome. I mean, what a terrible way. So they want to know what Jesus has to say about this. It was a loaded question because, as I was describing it a few minutes before, from what I can tell, even though stoning was prescribed, it wasn't frequently used because it was just so brutal. People found ways around it. So when they asked Jesus, "What do you say about it?" in order to test him, what they're really saying is, if you say that we should take this word literally and throw this woman off a cliff and stone her till she's dead, then you are too serious. On the other hand, if he says, well, let's just let her go, they would say he's not serious enough. So that was the test. Jesus knelt down and he began writing on the ground with his finger, and this has been the source of a lot of curiosity for a very long time. What was Jesus doing? Well, one thing I think he was doing, he was taking the focus off this woman. They had dragged her out of wherever it was that she was in Jerusalem. They paraded her through the streets all the way to the temple, come into the temple, which was lively and filled with people, and they made this woman shamefully stand before Jesus. She was probably exhausted by her own moral guilt. So Jesus kneels down, and suddenly they're not looking at her anymore. Surely he has borne our griefs and carried our sorrows. He's kind of taking grief and sorrow away from her into himself, at least for a few minutes. Another thing he might have been doing, he might have been thinking. Yeah, I guess I'm one of those people who thinks if Jesus was really fully human, then he probably didn't come with snap, snap, snap answers for all the questions. He had to think about things sometimes like we do. I mean, a friend of mine up at our lake place, he asked me a few days after the Charlie Kirk shooting, he said, "So I need a pastor. am I supposed to forgive Satan? And I thought, I've been at this a while, like 50 years or so. I don't think I've ever been asked that question before. So I said, let me think about that. That was my version of leaning down on the ground and writing with my finger. A day later, I got back to him and I said, from what I can tell, the Bible never tells us to forgive Satan, but what the Bible does tell us to do is to resist Satan. So Jesus may be just thinking. So they kept on questioning him, and then he straightened up, and he said to them, let any among you who is without sin cast the first stone. That's one of the most famous things that Jesus ever said. Whether you're a Christian or not, you tend to know whoever casts the first stone. You get that one. So I think maybe another thing Jesus was doing was he was giving them a chance to think about the question they had asked. If you don't get an answer right away, then you start to wonder, I wonder if it was the right question. Anyway, who knows what he was doing? But what Jesus does do in this case is he doesn't excuse the woman and he doesn't accuse the scribes and Pharisees. He just turns the mirror around so they have to look at themselves. The way we judge other people says as much about us as it does about them. So, Pope Francis, who am I to judge? Well, when they heard it, they went away one by one, beginning with the elders, and Jesus was left alone with the woman standing before him. Now, it said they went away beginning with the elders meaning literally the older ones. I don't know if it's true for all old men. In fact, I'm sure it's not true for all old men, because some of us get more cranky as we get older. But I think for a lot of people I know, let me just put it this way. When I was kind of your age, I was very serious in the way that the scribes and Pharisees were serious. We got to get the rules down here. But I find now that I'm older, I think maybe I'm a little more serious in the way that Jesus was serious. Life's difficult. Who am I to judge? All right, so finally, after all of this, we get to what, at least for me, is a little glimpse into Jesus and his form of holy curiosity. Jesus straightened up. He said to her, next slide, please. There we go. Jesus straightened up and said to her, woman, where are they? Has no one been left to condemn you? Neither do I condemn you. Go and sin no more. Can we try it again? All righty, thank you. Go and sin no more. Now see what Jesus is doing here. He's giving her back her future. They brought her there to be stoned, and he's saying, that's wiped away. It's clear. Now, this is great news for her with Jesus. But I'm wondering, what's it going to be like for her back home? She's going back to a community of people who are very serious about marriage and very serious about adultery. What she had done was shameful, it was immoral, it was humiliating, it was a brutal betrayer. When she goes home, what's her husband going to say? What are her kids going to say? What are the women of the town, the neighborhood, going to say? Are they going to ridicule her? Are they going to rub her nose in it, bring it up over and over again? Were they going to kind of shun her on the outside? They're going to whisper behind her back? She's returning to this very seriously religious neighborhood, so much so that they considered stoning as an option for an adulterous woman. What kind of person is she going to need back home if she's ever going to find the hope that Jesus gave her? She's going to need people who love her. So first curiosity question is, I'll say this for myself, you can translate it in any way you want, How can I be the kind of person who loves broken people in the way that Jesus does? Holy curiosity for me requires finding ways to love broken people. So, next slide. Oh, I've got it. Oh, where's the green thing? Don't have the green thing. Will that work? Oh, it appeared, the picture. Let me introduce you to Amy. A few of us at this little community on these little lakes, we decided that we were going to volunteer at Hardin Elementary School, which is, to give you an idea where we are, it's the closest elementary school. It's like 25 miles away. So we go there a couple times a month and we volunteer doing various things, tutoring, mentoring, things like that. Well, Christmas came last year and the school said there are several families here that just don't have the means to have much of a Christmas. So if you can adopt a family, that'd be great. So we didn't know her, we adopted Amy. That's Amy with 3 of her kids. She's got 2 other kids. Amy's 28 years old, has 5 kids. The oldest is 13, so you can do the math on that. Her dad has been out of the picture for a long time. Her mom died in a car accident. Her mom was driving high and drunk. And Amy was 12 years old and was in the back seat when the accident happened, so her mother died. She's had these kids by a couple of men, and the man who is currently her husband is in prison, so you get kind of the feeling for Amy. And she lives way, way in the backwoods. Anyway, we put together a collection of toys, and we went off and looking for her house. I don't know if you've been over in that part of East Texas. You drive up 146 past Rye. You take a right, and you go up 5 miles. First few miles it's paved. The second couple miles it's gravel, and then it's just mud and ruts. And then there's Amy's house, which is really a shed, like you could buy at Home Depot or Lowe's. And she lives in there with her 5 kids, 2,400 or 240 square feet. I don't know how she does it. Anyway, we went out there to deliver the gifts, and we realized this place, it was uninsulated. It was almost inhospitable. I don't know how anybody lives there. So we decided, a few of the men, we'd do a rehab. So we've done a rehab on Amy's house, pretty much completely rehabilitated the entire place. I have to say, and I think this is true for all of us, we had to ask ourselves a question: do we want to do something more than just give Christmas gifts? David Brooks describes his definition of stupidity as stupidity is behaving in a way that ignores the question, what would happen next? Stupidity is not asking the question, what's next? So if we do this, what's next? Well, it hasn't been very easy. Loving Amy has been a challenge. Love is patient. You want an expert on impatience, you're looking at him right here. Love is kind. I got a capacity for unkindness that boggles even my own mind. Love bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, endures all things. You know what's easy? What's easy is giving up. What's easy is letting go. So we've decided to get involved with Amy. Now, you see that picture on the wall, the next slide. That's actually a picture that our son Kevin painted. Kevin is a professional artist. That's what he does for a living. This was something he painted a long, long time ago when he was just getting started. That's the only one of his paintings we could afford, so that's why we have it. That's a photograph of it, and I love that. She's leaping into the light. So we gave that painting to Amy and hung on her wall. Hopefully that's the way she feels, like she's stepping into the light. However, Amy's kind of moved on. That shed that we rehabbed was quiet and empty. I don't know if she took the picture. I hope she did. And, you know, I feel kind of bad telling you this story, actually, in some ways, because I don't want you to stereotype what I mean when I'm talking about broken people. The broken people aren't just, 5 miles off the road, off 146 and, in Rye, Texas. The broken people are here in this room. They're your coworkers. There's someone in your family, a neighbor, or somebody in your Sunday school class. And broken people need to be loved in a particular kind of way. They need what I would describe as, Army Ranger, Navy SEAL kind of love. But if you don't, then you have to ask the question, what happens next? So, here's my second holy curiosity question. How can I forgive? No, next. Yeah, good, anticipating me. Here's my second holy curiosity. How can I forgive this person in a way that gives them a glimpse of their hopeful future? Forgiveness. I mean, it's everywhere. It's so important if you're going to be really serious follower of Jesus. Forgiveness is at the center of everything. First Easter in the morning, Mary Magdalene went to the tomb, the stone was rolled away, and eventually she had a brief conversation with Jesus. The rest of the disciples didn't see Jesus until evening. The passage says they were locked in their upper room. They were afraid that the Jews were going to come and do to them what they had just done to Jesus. And Jesus the door was locked. He just materialized in their presence. And he showed them his hands and his side. He said, "Peace be with you." And they were overjoyed to see him. And they said again a second time, "Peace be with you. As the Father has sent me, so I'm sending you." To do what? I mean, the disciples must have been on the edge of their seat. Okay, these are the marching orders. He says, if you forgive the sins of any, they are forgiven. If you retain the sins of any, they are retained. And with that, he's gone. That's it. If you want the simplified version of being a very serious follower of Jesus, it's going to come down to forgiveness. You've got to find ways to forgive broken people in a way that gives them a hopeful future. Next slide. Some of you probably seen kids basketball. Our grandkids have gone through these phases now. We watch little kids playing basketball. I remember I think it was the first time I went to one of these little kid basketball games. And the thing that struck me was, even though there were two guys there wearing striped shirts and black pants and black shoes and had a whistle, they weren't calling all the fouls. I mean, those kids were getting away with murder out there. I mean, what about double dribble? What about over and back? What about traveling? What about the 3-second rule, a 5-second rule? You can't just carry the ball down the field like this, There are rules. But then it occurred to me, if they enforced all the rules, they'd never play the game. If you enforce every rule, you have to understand there's a time. There's a lot to be said for grace. So if you're going to go around all full of your piety and knowledge of the rules, shame on you for this and shame on you for that, nobody's going to want to play the game with you. One fundamental and essential part of being a very serious follower of Jesus means doing the hard work of forgiveness, giving them a way back into the game. Where are your accusers? Jesus asks. Great holy curiosity question. Has no one been left to condemn you? So we need people who will forgive us. Next slide. All right. Some of you may remember a long time ago our grandson Alex. He was running around in the halls of the church here. Alex graduated from Santa Fe High School in May of this year. He graduated with honors, and his counselor told him he could go to any school he wanted to go to. And he said, I'm sick of school. So he enrolled in the Army. He is in basic training right now. Any of you guys been through basic training? Have lots of memories? Yeah. It's very regimented, and we hear from him from time to time. A little glimpse here, a little glimpse there, but that's him right there. He's the guy in the middle. He's got his game face on, and you better have it every day. I'll tell you what's easy. It's easy to hold grudges. It's easy to go after resentment, revenge, retribution. Easy to turn your back. Easy to walk away. But if you're a very serious follower of Jesus, you need to be curious about finding ways to forgive people. And remember David Brooks' question, if you don't forgive, what happens next? All right, next slide. My third holy curiosity question. How can I be generous with this person in a way that gives them a glimpse of their hopeful future? We talk a lot about generosity. And there's a whole bunch of, I guess I would describe them as forms of generosity that we could put in a silo over here. But Simone Weil gives us one more form of generosity. One more form of generosity. It fits in a different category by itself. She said, the most generous thing you can do is pay attention to people. The most generous form of the most important form of generosity is attention. Pay attention to the people around you. Holy curiosity and finding ways to pay attention to the people who are broken around you. Really, when you think about it, that's all Jesus did. He's walking down the road one day early in his ministry, turns around, sees two fellows following him. Follow me, he says. Walking by the lakeshore, he sees a couple of guys mending their nets. He notices them and follow me. Middle of his ministry, he's going down the road one day. He sees a man who was born blind. The passage does not say the disciples saw him. It says Jesus saw him. And then the disciples got in the conversation. Another time Jesus goes to Jerusalem, there was a pool with 5 porticos in which many sick people gathered, paralyzed, blind, and lame. Jesus went there and he noticed one man who'd been there 38 years. And he said, do you want to be healed? He's in Jericho one day, big crowds around. Walking out of town, he looks up, and there's Zacchaeus. Zacchaeus, come on down here. I'm going to have lunch with you today. That's all Jesus did. He just noticed people. He paid attention to people. All these people, Jesus noticed, were broken in one way or another, just like all of us. There's that great Hebrew parable that says, before every human being goes an angel announcing, behold the image of God. No matter how broken, behold the image of God. So what's next if you're not generous, if you don't notice the people around you? All right, next slide. A while back we invested in a generator. We made the decision to do this after, remember that big freeze, when was that, 4 or 5 years ago, when it was down really, really cold, and our house was up at the lake, was just freezing. And, we're trying to keep the water running so pipes don't freeze. One of our neighbors came and said, come down to our house. They had a generator. You have any idea what it's like to be in a cold house, and then go into a warm house? Oh. We made a decision at that point, we're buying a generator. So now we got a backup. And it's interesting to me how often power goes out, at least out in the country where we are, goes out all the time. But for us, it's just a flicker, and then the light's back on again. That's amazing. I like what Richard Rohr says. He said, love is not only what we do, it's how we do it. When we stand in the state of love that Jesus offers, we live inside of a different energy. You make the decision to love people and forgive people and be generous with people, and you discover a backup generator that will help you live this kind of life. Holy curiosity is the kind of energy force that comes from asking the right kind of questions. So I put this little caption on the top. Winston Churchill, a crusty old guy, said, "I'm only a worm, but at least I'm a glowworm." Maybe that's the best you can say for yourself. So just let your little light shine today. All right, let's pray. Lord, I'd like to thank you for these men and for the life that they are living, the life that you've given to them. Thank you for the challenges that they face and the way that they face them. I pray more and more their lives would be guided by holy curiosity that helps broken people find their way into life. I ask it in Jesus' name. Amen. All right.